Okay, Rosemary. Well, thanks so much for coming on and answering some questions about pollinators and all things pollinator gardens and related stuff. So thank you.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to be here. And my cat may make an occasional cameo.
We love it. Makes it all the more thrilling. Thrills and spills. There's going to be an action sequence here. All right. So why should we even care about pollinators? What are they? Bring us in.
Sure. So a pollinator by definition is an animal that moves, it visits flowers. It is there to get food. So if you're a bee, you're there for pollen and nectar. If you're a butterfly, you're mostly just there for nectar. And by visiting that flower, you get pollen on your body, and then you move it to another flower. And that is how fruits are made and how seeds are produced and how plants reproduce. So they are an integral part of plant reproduction. So that is what a pollinator is. Who are the pollinators? We have bees, butterflies, and then folks are sometimes less aware that wasps can be
I
pollinators.
was just wondering about that.
They can be. I think their more important role in sort of a garden is to be predators of garden pests, but they are also pollinators. Flies can be really great pollinators. If you've ever seen syrphid flies, they're the ones that kind of hover. They can be kind of stripy, like black and yellow stripes. They're small. They're great pollinators of some plants. They might actually be the primary visitor for some of them. Beetles can sometimes, like soldier beetles, you'll see on top of plants, they can be pollinators. Hummingbirds, we have the ruby-throated hummingbird around here, they're pollinators. And then in some places, bats, but not around here. That's more like in the tropical areas. So
Okay.
that's who our pollinators are, that's what they do. And the reason we should care is that pollinators are essential for our food supply. Something like a third of our diet is made up of food that depends on pollination from an animal. So an animal has to actually vector that pollination from flower to flower. And I would say more importantly, 80% of the world's plants are flowering and they require some level of pollination to survive. So I like to say that, the world as we know it is really dependent on pollinators.
Yeah. Which then, let's go down a dark hole for a second, because obviously they're under threat. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. Tell me about what is happening with, I mean, bees in particular, but any pollinator, are they in decline? I'm going to go with yes, they really are. Like, paint the picture. What's going on with them?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the unfortunate answer is yes. Bees, butterflies, and many other insects, not just pollinators, are in decline. And it can be difficult to perfectly characterize that just because, we need a lot of data to be able to say how things are changing over time. But what we definitely know is that we are losing species. So biodiversity of bees is going down. And it's happened at a pretty dramatic pace. So in North America, we historically have about 50 bumblebee species on the continent, and about a third of them are in decline. So their populations are going down. Some of those are what we call threatened, and some of them are like critically endangered. They're very, they're in danger of going extinct. So pollinators are declining. We're also losing butterfly biodiversity, and then there's some indication that it's possible that overall insect biomass is actually going down. So what that is a fancy way of just saying the number of insects is also probably declining overall. It's harder to quantify that, but the information that we do have about that suggests that that's what's happening. And I think you also asked, so what are the causes of decline? There are multiple interacting factors. So probably top of the list would be habitat loss. So we've lost a lot of natural habitat to certainly around here, it would be more like urbanized type of habitat, residential land use, commercial land use, so more like impervious surface and building structures. And then the other large land conversion, and probably the bigger one, if we're talking about, at the national scale or globally, would be conversion to intensive agriculture. So habitat loss is at the top. Pesticide use is a huge issue. That part of the reason why those intensive ag lands are pollinator unfriendly is not just that they've gotten rid of habitat, but they also tend to be very chemically intensive. And we use a lot of chemicals just in our day-to-day lives. People use pesticides for all sorts of things, and a lot of them are damaging for pollinators. And then we also have some other culprits like disease, climate change, invasive species, and all of those things are really interacting together. They're all interacting and causing declines. So
Yeah.
it's not just one thing, multiple.
Yeah. What is something that anyone can do? Like, can we actually do stuff as solo, if we're a homeowner, we have maybe some property, or even if we don't, like, what can people do?
Yeah. I mean, the good answer is there's actually lots of different things that you can do, and they're all very important. So if you just at the individual scale, starting small, if you don't have a lot of flowers in your yard, or if you have a lot of lawn space, one thing that you can do is create habitat for bees. It is not enough to just conserve these pristine areas. We really need to create habitat where we live. We need to turn our backyards, our parks into places that, where insects can coexist with us. So flowers are a huge part of it. And I would say to the degree that you can, plant native species in a lot of nurseries in the area, including like Marblehead Gardens, Wolf Hill, Russell Garden Center. A lot of those places are increasingly stocking native plants and labeling them that way because there's such a demand for them, which is fabulous. Our native insects have co-evolved with those plants for a really long time, so those are the best plants for them in terms of nutrition. So that is one thing that you can do. More flowers is always better. That's more food for bees and butterflies and the like. And the second thing you can do is if you're going to plant a pollinator garden, I tell people this, if you plant a pollinator garden, there's the cat, it is antithetical to use pesticides in that garden, right? You're bringing those bees in. That's why you planted it. And other things are going to show up there too. In fact, I have a pollinator garden in front of my yard, and some things are munching away, but the plant is sustaining the damage, and it will probably come, flourishing back once that insect's life cycle has ended for the season. That's okay. That's a sign of actual life in your garden. It means it's a place that sustains life, and that is a good thing. So learning to tolerate some what people would call damage, what I call signs of life, is a great thing that you can do, and just avoid all pesticide use. And if you are going to use something, there are some other options. Like if you get like powdery mildew is a really common one. Something like a vinegar spray can actually work wonders, and then it doesn't damage your plant and doesn't really harm anything else. So those are two big things. But if you don't have your own space, there's still stuff that you can do. You can get involved with Green Beverly's pollinator project. We have some public plantings that definitely need volunteers for watering and maintenance. It's also just a really fun way to get to know fellow plant nerds in your community. And you can also participate in other kinds of public plantings as well. So I would recommend that if you don't have your own property to work with. The other way of getting engaged, if you're just like not a hands in the dirt kind of person, would be through advocacy or education. So talking to your neighbors about pollinators, making yourself more aware of what the different pollinators are. There are many different kinds of bees out there if you really start to look. So, letting folks know that there aren't just bumblebees, there aren't just honeybees. And getting involved in legislation is the other thing I would say. There are a number of state level bills that address pollinator health that have been introduced session after session, and they need a boost to actually get passed. So I would say also get involved with legislation. And one way you can check into that is going to the Mass Pollinator Network website, masspollinatornetwork.org, and they keep track of some of those bills.
Fantastic. Great. So, and I would even add, let's say you're renting. What about putting a pot of flowers on your stoop if you can?
Definitely. Yeah.
Anything like that.
Anything like that. The pot of flowers matters. And then if you talk to your neighbor and they put out a pot of flowers, then you have twice the number of flowers, right?
Yeah.
The 0 flowers you had before. It all makes a difference. The Beverly Pollinator Project is what we call a pollinator pathway project. So the goal is to actually map people's personal gardens and these public plantings so that we can see how connected they are and whether we can draw sort of lines between them where we, like a distance where we know a bee can actually travel. And the whole point of that is to turn the places where we live into places where bees can sort of freely traverse the landscape and be bees.
Yeah, it's like a whole corridor. I love it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I was gonna wait until I stop recording, but we're doing really good on time, and I wanted to ask you something personal because honestly, if I have this question, maybe somebody who has a garden, a yard would have these questions too. So if I were ever to like I'm curious about your role as far as, are you a gardening like could I hire you to come and look at my garden and give me advice or make changes, or because I just bought a property about 8 months ago here in Beverly. I have the most gorgeous garden that just like sprang up out of nowhere, but I want to understand. It's a weird way to put it, but I want it to be a conscious garden. Like I really look carefully at what is there, that there's no invasive species, that it is pollinator friendly, that there are flowers that come up through the different months. I really want to think it through and understand what the heck I'm looking at. Is that something you would help with?
So I am not I like to garden and I'm an enthusiastic gardener. I'm actually I have a science background. I'm a scientist, and I've now moved from the research world into the policy world. But I could recommend some folks who do actually do garden design. What I can do is help identify plant species. Like if you sent me a picture, I love getting random like bug photos from people and trying to figure out what it is. I will admit I'm actually think a little bit better with the bugs than with the plants in terms of identification. But yes, I'm happy to always give advice about what kinds of plants you could use in your garden. A lot of it depends. It's all about right plant, right place, right? So work with what you have is what I always suggest, and buy the plants that are going to actually thrive in that location. You don't need to necessarily do a bunch of soil amending and all of that. A lot
Yeah.
of the native plants actually prefer like less good soil, like
Interesting.
rocky, dry. Butterfly weed is a good example. It's the bright orange milkweed type.
Mhm.
It's Asclepias tuberosa, and it loves what I call crappy soil. Like it is extremely drought tolerant. It prefers to pop up in these like sandy, rocky places. If you try to put it in like a nice garden bed, it actually probably won't do very well there, which is crazy, but true.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I have a yard that there are some brown patches, and I've started taking like, let's say there's a pot that I got from somebody, like a pot of, it used to be a potted plant and the plant died over the winter. I probably should have taken it in. It seemed like an outdoor plant. I didn't know what to do with it. So I took that soil, which seems to be really dense and healthy and whatever, and I spread it out over these sad brown patches. The jury's out. We're working on it. I'm also a member of Black Earth, so I
Yeah,
know that I will have access to some really nice soil from compost that they do.
yeah,
So yeah, all these great resources.
nice.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This really gives, I think, anyone who is interested in this stuff a sense of the right questions to ask and how they could engage with you, and some good info that they could use right away. So
Yeah,
thank you.
awesome. Thank you.